I'm Tim, the brand weaver, and this is Branding for Breweries, the podcast that helps you grow your brewery, build a better brand, and connect with more drinkers. Each week, I'm joined by the brightest minds in the beer world, sharing practical tips to help your brewery stand out and sell more beer. Let's get stuck in. What up, 24-hour party people? 'Tis I, Tim the Brand Weaver, and you are listening to Branding for Breweries, the show that brings you the brightest minds from around the world to help your brewery thrive and survive. And today is no exception, because I am joined by the delightful Mr. Mark. Now, what Mark doesn't know about data when it comes to beer is not worth knowing, my friends. And I stumbled across Mark on LinkedIn when he was tagged into a post when he was doing a talk around cask beer, and I was like, this guy knows his stuff. Let's have a conversation, because I like data. I feel more people need to be using data when it comes to building their brand, targeting their audience, even picking where you're going to put your tap room. But that is enough spiel from me, ladies and gentlemen. You want to hear from the intelligent person in the room, so we better get one in, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, put your digital hands together for Mr. Mark. Woo, Mark! How are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Tim. Thanks for inviting me on today.
Dude, I am more than happy to have you here, bud, because data, at least in the branding and marketing world, is talked about a little bit, but potentially it should be talked about more, in my opinion. Before we dive into that, though, Mark, would you be kind enough as to embellish us a little bit beyond I've just said you're called Mark and you know data? Who are you? What do you do? And where'd you come from?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I'm Mark Bentley. I'm the business development director at a business called HDI that provide lots of data and insight, to people right across the hospitality sector, including lots of drink suppliers. But I, prior to joining HDI, I worked at Molson Coors for 6.5 years. So I ran their category management team, during that time, I was really kind of working with lots of the big pub groups. Talking to them about market trends, consumer trends, advising them about what product ranges they should be putting on their bars. And then I also, just became an absolute beer geek in the time that I was there. And I did all the qualifications and became qualified as a beer sommelier. Which was very cool. I mean, it's you get to do an exam where you just go and sit there and drink beer for a few hours. It's like, what's not to like about that, to be fair?
I mean, if there were more exams like that at school, I think more. No, that sounds wrong. Don't encourage kids to drink, but you know what I mean, people. It's absolutely fine. So you know it from a different aspect, but also an appreciation of the product, of the brands as well. But when we talk about the data and what you've seen with the pub groups and all that kind of stuff, where are you seeing like the biggest? Where do breweries go wrong when looking at data, or is it a case of they're just not even looking at it half the time?
I think it's interesting in the world of hospitality, because hospitality is a people industry, and I think sometimes the mistake that people make is, because hospitality is a people focused industry. It's people are absolutely kind of like fundamental to the world of hospitality, but they often wrongly assume that there isn't data there to help them, or they make the assumption that actually there's things which they should know. And for me, it's like, there's lots of great data kind of out there now, which can help you understand what's happening, understand what type of people eating and drinking in different places, which businesses are really performing well, what the hospitality market looks like in different parts of the country. There's all of these things you wouldn't be expected to just intuitively know that. Data can help you. And it's kind of no understanding is almost like, yes, hospitality is a real people-focused kind of industry, but there's also data there that can help us, and why wouldn't we use data to help us ultimately make better decisions?
Yeah, I suppose that data's got to boil down into a number of different categories, right? You say you've got the people, but you got the product, the people, the location? Are there core kind of like buckets of data that these groups should be looking at?
Yeah, I think the great and obvious kind of start point always is the customer, so the guest, or the drinker. Kind of, if you're talking about in the beer world, and I think for me it's like that's always the kind of the key thing. And when I was leading the category management team, at Molson Coors and going presenting to people, it would be always about wanting to bring insights on their business. Showing that you really understand someone's kind of business is a great starting point to then ultimately make the case for where your brands can then play. But I think if I'm looking in the drinks world, it's about understanding, well, actually, who is the customer, who is the guest. And at HDI, I mean, what we've very much kind of done in the hospitality space is pioneered the use of card spending data. So we have a consumer panel of 10.2 million people. And effectively what we're doing is following around people's card payments. So when people are going and spending it in different places, we're able to see who's spending where, what they're spending kind of day by day, site by site. So we've got that for over 140,000 individual hospitality venues. So we can effectively see what's going on within the walls of individual businesses, and then also look at individual local market areas. And so if you want to be basically laser sharp in terms of actually, I know that my brands really sell well in the Dog and Duck. We can say, well, actually, where are the lookalike sites, that are identically profiled to the Dog and Duck? So actually, if you're thinking, actually, I'm a drink supplier and I know that my brands sell well here, we can actually say, well, what is it about the profile of the customers, how that venue trades? Is it attracting people that are of a certain age, or that travel a long way, or they're just like they're people that live within the local area? All the kind of things really in terms of building a very, very detailed picture of an individual venue, and then you can go and identify the lookalikes. So it's like, if your brand sell well here, then it's these are the best prospects because they're identically profiled to where your brand already sells well.
I mean, that gives you a massive leg up, doesn't it? Because you're just spotting the copycats, but in a good way. The matrix is there and it's been filled in for you. I suppose that's getting quite granular down to an individual brewery level. But what are you seeing? What are the general observations when you're looking at that spending data and that location information that you've got across? What was it, 10.2 mil that you were saying?
Yeah, it's 10.2 million people. So it's basically a mini United Kingdom population, really, in terms of the real rich data that we've got.
So what are the biggest takeaways that you're finding from that data? And then we can start to drill down into more of an individual brewery approach.
Yeah, so I mean, we track people right across hospitality and more broadly. So I think if I look at the world of hospitality, I think one of the big things is pubs and bars. Now, it's still the biggest sector of the market. Around 30% of the money that we spend in hospitality, is going through pubs and bars. But when we look at the proportion of where we're spending our money now, hospitality is the pubs and bars share of the overall market is being squeezed. The casual dining sector is the other kind of key sector which is under pressure, and that's had sort of quite well publicised challenges. But then we're spending more of our money on delivery. So the delivery aggregators they're taking kind of more of our spend. And then also things like coffee and sandwich shops as well. I've been seeing kind of growth in their overall kind of share of wallet that they're attracting from us.
Okay. And what does that mean? Obviously, we're talking about pubs there, but is there a difference in terms of a tap room, I suppose, in that respect, or do they get bunched into the same data as pubs do? Or?
Yeah, and we break the market down in different ways. So I think we generally have different chains. So the big sort of managed operators will pick up as kind of individual brands. The tap rooms will be in our data will be sort of more sort of generically under sort of like unbranded kind of pubs and bars. But just the nature of our data, because we're following our panel of 10.2 million people around sort of site by site, we can go and see what's happening within an individual kind of like business. Or we can kind of like aggregate things up and kind of look more broadly. But I was looking recently. I had a visit to Rivington's tap room kind of a few weeks ago. Random, where sort of two worlds collide. It was one of my old uni housemates. He's her husband was the co-founder of the brewery, and that was one I was actually going to go and have a look at what the data said about Rivington tap room. And I was expecting, given that it's on a farm, kind of in sort of Chorley, sort of like Lancashire, well, not far from Chorley, sort of in Lancashire, I was expecting to see pretty small numbers of people that kind of going there. And then I was blown away to then see that just from our panel alone, there was spend data for nearly 6,500 kind of people in the last year alone, which is crudely we probably times that by 10 to kind of get to the full sort of upweight our panel. So you're looking at about 65,000 unique customers going through a tap room on a farm, kind of in rural Lancashire. It's mind blowing, really.
That is amazing. I suppose obviously they've got their events and what they host with the festivals and things as well, which add to that. But I'm wondering, like, is it easy for breweries to get their hands on this kind of data? Because I suppose the first challenge is, where do I find this data before you can even start to leverage it and use it to make informed choices that, move your business forward?
Yeah, I mean, it is easy for breweries to do it. I think obviously they can give me a shout, and I can kind of give people the details of sort of different options and things that are available. But I think probably the kind of the single thing is actually just knowing that this type of data is available. Before sort of HDI came along and we were doing the sorts of things that we were doing with consumer card spend data, this wasn't data that was widely available. There was, and the thing that drew me to HDI was the kind of almost the opportunity to almost bring a retail level of data and insight into the hospitality sector. Most of my career, prior to probably about half of my career was worked in the world of retail. So anyone that's worked either for supermarkets or for big suppliers working with supermarkets know that the retail sector, you're absolutely swimming in data. You've got all the I don't know, if you take Tesco, you've got your sort of, your Tesco club card kind of data sort of via Humby. You'd have all of your named account data and sort of market reads. There's probably the challenge for people supplying into the supermarket sector is almost like, it's not about having data. It's like, actually there's so much data, it's almost like you can always be a bit overwhelmed and what do you do with it? I remember joining when I joined Molson Coors and starting to work in hospitality, and I guess a bit like the comment they made earlier around kind of hospitality being a people business, you almost then kind of like left feeling is almost like, where is the data? It's kind of like, they feel like a million miles away. But I've always felt that yes, the worlds of retail and hospitality are very different, but they're not that different, and actually, the data, which the world of retail is probably kind of very, very heavily data led, the world of hospitality can benefit from data as well, because a lot of the decisions that people are making ultimately are the same decisions. It's just, it looks different if it's trying to put products onto a supermarket shelves versus serving people in a bar or a restaurant.
Yeah. And I know obviously you say about HDI you can really support and help the breweries with that, but I'm sat here wondering, like, is there maybe not the all bells and whistles HDI, but can breweries look in more publicly available data spaces to try and get early foundational ideas about what's going on with their brand, or is it always behind a paywall somewhere?
No, I mean there's different ways. I think for me, like if you're a brewery and you've got a list of your stockists, then nothing beats getting out into trade and actually going and even just sort of sitting in pubs and bars and just observing and kind of seeing what's going on. Now you'll only ever get a snapshot of what's happening at a particular point in time. Some of the data, things that we have, we can give that sort of richer kind of view because we're seeing the performance of venues and the types of customers they're having, and there's real kind of like richness there. But if you've got a list of your accounts, kind of trying to go in and really understand, well, how can you sort of segment your account base? So some of the accounts which maybe have got which are your best sellers, well, what is it about them? And start to try and build a picture of, well, why is your most successful, or your biggest volume stockist, why is it that? Maybe some of the other accounts which have got a lower level of sales, again, kind of know why is that? So I think the more time you spend in trade, just kind of going in with your eyes and ears, speaking to people, then you can almost gather your own data and kind of start to try and kind of build a picture. It just becomes like, the more as you scale a business, obviously it becomes harder to do that.
Yeah, it's actually having the time, I suppose, to then go and gather that yourself. Hence, you always shortcut and you try and find the people to support. I'm just contemplating, like, actually, if you were to get that information, and it goes back to what you mentioned about earlier on, like, our beer sells really well in this particular venue here. What are the other venues that look very, very similar to this? That to me sounds like such a compelling reason for that second or third venue to go, all right, we'll give you a shot, because you're going, actually, look, you are pretty much the exact same as this venue here. We shift really well on this point. There's a couple of variables, but actually a brewery going in with more of an informed view as to why they should stock their beer, I would hope is going to make people behind the bar go, okay, these guys have done their research. It makes sense to me. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's with my category management background, that's what I would talk about as category-based selling. So effectively, you're trying to kind of build up a really compelling rationale as to why your brands are relevant. Now, if we were doing a sort of a profiling kind of piece of work where you look at where particular brands sell well, what you then kind of get is a very, very clear picture of, well, actually these are the characteristics kind of where a particular business's brand sell well. So we've done this sort of work with all sorts of drink suppliers, and there's an example that I can mention. We did a project with Timothy Taylor's. Mm-hmm. So again, looking across their kind of portfolio, you've got the traditional cask brands like Landlord, and then there's other kind of sort of brands sort of playing into the modern keg kind of area. But effectively, getting clear in terms of where different products sell well enables you to then kind of develop almost like a bullseye profile of outlet and customers. So you can then be clear on actually, well, okay, well, here's a prospect list to go after of, I don't know, the top 1,000 or top 2,000 sites, whatever it may be. But it's really, really compelling. If you're sat down, whether that's big pubco, speaking to a buyer, or if it's even going in and speaking to the licensee of an individual kind of venue, obviously how you would position the sales story is probably going to vary quite widely, but the fundamental piece is the same. Really, is actually you're going in kind of saying is I believe this brand is going to work really well for you. That's because I know where my brand sells, and I can show that to you. And actually, I've got the insight that says that your venue, looks exactly like the bullseye kind of profile for our particular brands. And then after that point, you then you can get into wax lyrical about how amazing your brands are, and kind of all the the brand story, and any marketing support and activation support and things like that you kind of give. But I think the fundamental difference with category-based selling is you're starting with the individual customer. You're looking at bringing insight on their business, and then showing that because you understand their business, you can show that what you've got to offer is going to be a good fit. Whereas there'll be quite a lot of times where over the years I've seen presentations, and it's brand owners go in and they just want to tell someone straight away all about their brand, and it's a bit like, well, that's not the most important thing is the person you're trying to sell to and their business. If you show you understand that, then you can get on to tell them all about the amazing things about you.
100%. I've had this conversation a couple of times on this show alone about it's so important to know what makes your brewery great, and why the beer is different and why people should be interested. But it's even more important to know about who you're talking to and engage with them in a way that resonates, versus just going, hey, we're awesome, you should really check us out. Because it's mildly egotistical to begin with, and to even like pub co-owners, indie pubs, they're busy, man. Like, you've got to be able to do something really quick to break through and grab their attention before then going, oh, by the way, yes, we are awesome as well. It's kind of
I also say as well, it's about being really, really clear that the places that you're trying to sell your brands into do actually have the potential to sell your brands. And probably one of my real bugbears is like if people's approach to selling is to kind of like walk into a bar, see what's on there, and maybe ask people, well, what's your lowest selling brand, and then just look to tap swap. And actually, like that's really, really dangerous, because you might just replace one poorly performing brand with another poorly performing brand, and ultimately you've not done anyone any favors. Okay, yes, you've secured a listing for your brand, but actually, if there's all the capex costs and securing a listing and that brand doesn't stick, then it's like it's a complete waste of time. What you want to be kind of doing really is going after quality distribution, and that's been really, really clear about. Actually, I know where my brands are going to go and sell well, So I'm going to get the distribution in there, and it's going to be distribution that then sticks. From a category-based selling perspective, I'd always be a big advocate of try and start with a blank sheet of paper. So if you think about, well, what type of venue is this? What type of customers does it have? What are the occasions that it's servicing? And then really think is like, based on all of that knowledge that you have about an individual venue, well, what does it need in terms of different roles on the bar, different types of products and brands, and that should be your sort of fundamental building blocks to kind of then go and say, well, actually, that this is the ideal range that this particular venue needs. If you're going in and just kind of going, oh, I can swap out one brand for this brand, it's like, well, there's a danger. You just like actually that outlet has completely got the wrong range, and it's never going to work. So it's just taking a different approach, really.
And I'm just thinking, like, that's how you would then kind of roll it out to existing pubs and target kind of venues. But can you then use data? Say you were a brewery, like, okay, I haven't got a tap room. I can't get a tap room open at the brewery. I need to find the best location for my tap room. Would data be able to play a lot into finding the perfect spot or the close to perfect spot for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we often do give data for people from what we call our site universe, which is basically a huge database of hospitality venues right across the country. But it means that we can see in any postcode area, any sort of town, we can see levels of hospitality spend that are going through in individual businesses. We see the types of customer profiles, so age, affluence, gendered, different sort of demographic groups. We see how busy areas are by day of week and by time of day. So we can basically look at any area and almost give people the data to kind of show what's happening kind of there. I think if people were looking at a new location, it's about understanding, well, actually, is there a good amount of hospitality spend in this area? Has it got the right type of people spending at the right times? Now, you might want to approach that from a perspective of, well, this is what my ideal kind of profile then looks like. So I can then assess the criteria that I then see in the numbers about, does this area look good or not? Does this kind of does this really kind of like marry up? So the data's all there, and it can absolutely kind of help. I think the only thing I probably would say in terms of tap rooms is if you're a brewery that's got an incredible like cult following, a bit like my Rivington example kind of before, you could then be in kind of an area that you may not necessarily think as being a real high footfall location, but it could still be possible to kind of to draw people in.
Yeah, you can turn it into the high footfall area if you have that demand, I suppose, that magnetism from a brand, right?
Yeah, and if I take the Rivington example, I mean they do their big sort of summer festival, and they can get all sorts of craft breweries kind of coming along, and people can camp there over a weekend and have an amazing kind of craft beer kind of like scene. But then there's also a running club, there's a cycling club, so they're in the countryside, but they'll bring significant numbers of people in around kind of like kind of on sort of different social occasions where people are, I guess, can go for a run and then have a beer, or go on a cycle ride and have a beer. It's kind of like sounds like my perfect form of place to go, really.
There you go. Well, and hence you were there. They pulled you in, but you're sad into it. I'm sat going, right. So if I wanted to open up a tap room for Tim's mythical brewery, which I don't have, and that would be shocking if I did, but I could see, like, first things first. So if we didn't have the magnetism of a brand that would pull people in, I would go, right, look at data. What's my target? Who is the consumer? Like, what is data telling me about who's actually drinking my beer a lot? Because you could have that aspirational, I want this kind of person to drink my beer, but it could be a different person. And then can you take that data and then go, well, it's actually this kind of person who's drinking my beer. You get a lot of this kind of person drinking this kind of beer in this kind of location, and there are other venues around it that are similar. Is that the kind of logical workflow that you move through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we often do a lot of work where we profile individual venues, but there's also things that we can do in terms of looking at kind of broader customer spend. So pretty much anything that could appear on someone's bank statement, we can, if we can see with retailers where people spend, we can then kind of go and see where people kind of like are then spending in the hospitality sector or more broadly. So an example, we did a project with SIBA a couple of years ago now, and as part of that, we did do some profiling from different SIBA members and SIBA themselves in terms of actually where do their beers sell well. But we also kind of then we looked at Beer 52 subscribers and also camera members, and then actually said, well, actually, look, if we can profile people who are have sort of Beer 52 boxes delivered to their door, or camera members, that gives us another data point, as part of kind of building kind of a sort of a well-rounded picture. And I think the logic of the Beer 52 thing was like, actually, if you're someone that is that engaged with craft beer, that you're going to have a craft beer box delivered to your door, when you then go and visit pubs, you're probably not going to be drinking kind of standard lager brands. So again, you're able to kind of look at those profiles and think, well, actually, where does that profile of person, where do they go drinking in pubs, and then use that as part of kind of being laser sharp in terms of actually, well, look, this is looking kind of right across the whole universe of pubs in the country. This is a kind of craft beer consumer bullseye that we've now created. We can then go and say, where is that profile of person present and spending?
Yeah, you can be like laser focused on it, going, right, those are my people. This is where I want to be, and this is where I want to be involved in.
Yeah, and the camera one as well, as you'd probably imagine. I mean, they are like they're two very, very different camps. It's kind of I think I listened to your last podcast. You had it was Giles, wasn't it, from Hall and Woodhouse?
Oh, Giles, yeah, from Badger Outland,
yeah, and he sort of mentioned how I don't know. I think there's sometimes there is something in stereotypes. And I think you obviously got to be careful kind of in using stereotypes. But when you look at when we profiled the camera members, you did see sort of like older, kind of very male, kind of like bias. Whereas the Beer 52, still very male kind of dominant, but a lot younger and probably a lot more diverse in terms of that audience.
Yeah, there is some truth in the stereotypes, which is good and bad, at least, I suppose, in many ways. We haven't really touched on price much, Mark, and what data tells us about price, because there's a logic in my mind that goes, well, if you sell your beer for cheaper, you're going to sell more of it. But that is just logic in my mind, and me still having a student mentality, even though I'm definitely not a student anymore. What does the data tell us? Like, is that the case, or can you still be a premium priced beer and get good sales out of it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things in recent years is that we've seen that people are prepared to pay for quality. So, I mean, the real monumental shift that happened kind of over the pandemic kind of years was a real acceleration in terms of the growth of sort of world lagers, and the acceleration of the decline then in terms of the standard lagers. So people moving away from your Carling Fosters and Carlsbergs into more of your Madries, Morettis, Peronis, kind of etc. And I mean, that's when you look at the shape of the beer market, that was just almost that kind of like everything else pretty much remained as was in terms of the shares of the different sectors. But you saw, big kind of move out of the standard lagers and the kind of a big kind of migration of people into the world lagers. And that was very much a reflection of people sort of buying less but buying better, prepared to pay more for quality. And I just think that you've also got the backdrop over that whole period of cost of living crisis, and the prices have been kind of soaring and everything else. But I think just the way that people are engaging with pubs is different. People will be going out less frequently, but when they do go out, they're prepared to pay. Maybe drinking kind of slightly less than maybe we would have done in kind of years gone by. But actually are prepared to kind of pay for that quality drinking experience.
The lager piece, it makes sense. Yeah, it's like the premiumization, if that's a word. It is of lager. But then I look at like the other categories, but I think like cask, keg, and lager. I know lager sits in there, but that's the big consumption piece, right?
Yeah.
But if we then go cask and keg, Does it indicate that keg has more of a premium kind of level already because it has a higher price point, or is there still room for keg to go, well, this is accessible keg and premium keg?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's a definite opportunity. I mean, it's category management principles again, really, in terms of sort of good, better, best. In terms of having tiering. I think if you're looking at the profile of guests, or customers in a venue, it's about trying to understand is like how much stretch do you need in your pricing. So I mean, I've just made the point about people being prepared to pay more for quality and be able to kind of be ready and willing to trade up. Probably going to contradict myself entirely now and kind of say actually look, there's if you're in an area where actually it's more of a sort of value focused venue and maybe you have kind of like less affluent customer demographics, then having the more affordable options is going to be really, really important for that venue. So I think from an operator perspective, it's trying to understand the price sensitivity of individual venues, and you always want to have the stretch. If people are prepared to pay sort of top dollar for their drinks, you want to be able to have the kind of the stretch kind of in the menu, but also you've got to be really, really careful that you don't price people out. I know it's something that even when doing things like refurbs, I've heard operators kind of like almost sort of say is like, there's almost a danger that actually look, we spent loads of money making this kind of pub really, really nice now. We don't want people to perceive that, oh, that's a bit kind of expensive now, and that's not going to be for people like me day to day. So it's a real fine balancing kind of act, and a real sort of blend of art and science really in terms of getting pricing right. But it's we've got lots of experience in our team. We often help people with kind of pricing strategy kind of work. But it's a complex area. But you got to have the stretch, and it's a real kind of mix because operators can't afford to leave value on the table. Given all of the kind of inflationary pressures, the cost pressures that kind of like businesses are facing, businesses can't afford to be underpricing. If there is the opportunity to charge more. But then obviously if you kind of put your prices too high and then you kind of stop people coming and lose your repeat visits and things, it's kind of it's a really, really tough balancing act.
And I see it almost as like another lens or another filter that you're putting that kind of perfect market, perfect location, perfect price point, and each and every time you're using data to make that informed choice. Can it ever go wrong, like being data informed? Do you see these anomalies pop up at some point going, I did not see that happening? Like the data says it should be booming right now, but it's not.
Yeah, there'll always be sort of like anomalies and kind of things. I think there's, I don't know, it's the world of hospitality, and it's people, human nature. We kind of things aren't always entirely predictable, and as you would expect. But I think I'm sort of reassured, like when I look at a lot of the things in the data that we work with, that generally things are as you would expect, or when you start to dig into the data, you can start to make sense of things. So I think it's always a question of like data can get you so far, but like, and this is why probably one of my kind of like messages really around people shouldn't be afraid of data is it's like ultimately hospitality is still a people focused business. It's like you can look at lots of data and you can use it to kind of like make your decisions, but ultimately it's still people at the heart of it, and people have got to say, no, look at that data and then decide, well, because of that, and I'm going to do this. It's like, we can help you be better informed, avoid costly mistakes, make good decisions for your business. But ultimately, like it all comes down to people.
Yeah, people are at the heart of it, and 9 times out of 10, people are messy, like unpredictable. So I can see where you're coming from. I think we were talking about the different categories and the price position, and one thing I just want to loop back to though is, of course, God bless it, cask. And that, when we talk about pricing and we talk about premiumization of a brand, of a product type, yeah, and I know this was something that you were talking about previously, like where can you go with cask? Like, are you fighting a losing battle trying to charge more for it, or is there room for growth and improvement in that area?
Yeah, cask is a real conundrum really for the sector. Like, I've done lots of work kind of in cask ale kind of over the years. I still sit as part of the Cask Matters working group, which is a group that's brought together by Mark, looking at how we sort of champion and support cask ale. The real kind of like strange thing is when you look at the profile of a cask ale drinker, they are older, we know that, but more affluent. And yet, despite having a very affluent customer base, cask is typically one of the cheapest products on the bar. Often, priced only ever kind of like slightly higher than standard lager, and it makes absolute no sense given all of the care and attention that kind of goes into cask ale. Unlike keg, cask isn't plug and play. It's live, fresh product, and like the brewing process is finished off in the pub cellar. It takes real skill, like care and attention, to kind of do cask and to do it well. Yet that's not reflected in the price point. And I think that probably one of the things that's happened with cask is that as a collective, the industry has failed to get across the message to drinkers about what makes cask ale so special and being a product that is worth paying more for. Because I think when you kind of step back and try and objectively kind of think about, well, what are all the USPs that cask ale has, it ticks all the boxes of what kind of younger drinkers and things say they're looking for. But it's kind of it's seen as old-fashioned, kind of old man beer, kind of and there's quite a lot of baggage associated with the cask category. So I think it's kind of I think it needs a reset as a category, and I think some of the direction of travel in terms of things that are happening in the market probably kind of set it up for that. But I think for me that cask pricing is one of those sort of elephants in the room where you sort of think, well, actually, why is it as it is? This just makes no sense.
And I don't know if you've spotted it, but I was talking to Giles about this last week. Actually, I've seen more what would be stereotypically seen as a keg brand moving back into cask and like kind of introducing a cask version of a keg beer. And I think that's a really interesting spin, because I think that's a great way to pull the keg market into cask versus cask then trying to create keg. You already are like carrying a bit of stigma around, well, that's cask, so is it an older generation's keg beer they're trying to create? Have you spotted much of that?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting one. I think apart from people who are the real enthusiasts kind of in the beer world, I think general public won't have a clue the difference between cask versus keg. So I think we sometimes in the industry get fixated on cask versus keg and almost thinking about these kind of different product formats, but the reality kind of general kind of person on the street will not have a clue. So I think it's very smart in terms of brands operating across kind of different different sectors. I mean, probably for independent breweries, it can be easier to get onto bars at scale in cask rather than keg, that's a whole other topic. But yeah, I think there's a real opportunity for brands to be present in different formats. But then I think brands can really step up is actually then give the education for people around, well, what makes the different formats unique and different. I mean, I think I've seen it. Years ago, I went into the Tiny Rebel, one of the Tiny Rebel bars kind of in Cardiff, and they had the same brand on cask and keg. And I think it's a fascinating exercise with people who have never done it before, but it's almost like try the same brand on kind of both formats and see which one you prefer. And I think certain brands probably lend themselves more to cask than to keg. Others actually just in terms of flavour, kind of taste profile, there's real kind of nuances across kind of the different dispense kind of formats. So I think it's a really interesting kind of thing to do in terms of actually, look, this is the same beer, but this is how this tastes when it's served as cask or as a keg format.
And it is that experiential piece again, which I love. And if you can offer that, but you did very quickly and unintentionally put me in my place, which is just like, but the majority of the people out there won't even know the difference. And I think that is something that we so get lost in our passion for we want to see beer do well. We want, be it cask keg or whatever, it's going to, thrive and survive. That I suppose that's the biggest data takeaway. You've got to think about the actual people at the end of the day, and realistically, what do they want and need, and get out of your own head in that respect. So thanks for the reality check. I appreciate it.
I'll probably say, if I look at a recent example of a brand that's kind of really doing that well, is Ossett Brewery with their rat brand.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're showing up completely disruptive, like things that you would never expect in the cask category. But again, they've got brands that are in keg format, they've got brands that are in cask format, and it's almost just recognizing actually we're just going to be a cool brand, and it's like we're available in kind of different formats. It's like fantastic when you've got, you can be cask or keg in the pub, and then you've got your sort of small pack kind of like for people to kind of enjoy cans and things at home as well. So I think that was probably one of the big takeouts when I was preparing for the cask seminar, because I did a presentation all about how to engage the consumer. And I spoke to Jamie Lawson and Ed from Ossett, and I think they were really, really, really sort of banging the drum about the need to be disruptive. And actually, they've built a marketing team where they've got people that actually they live in the social media world. They've the way they think about brands, the way they look to kind of communicate would be very, very different. I think you can see what they've done in terms of the kind of the rat brand kind of like now. And I think we need more of that kind of in the cask category to kind of like shake things up and try and kind of like engage a whole new generation of kind of drinkers and just change people's perceptions, really.
Yeah, the evolution of cask is. You're right. Ossett have done it so very well. It's a fantastic case study, and even with the collaborations and who they're bringing in and like who they're teaming up with, it's phenomenal. And I'm chatting to Rich, the head of sales. I want to get him on a call at some point, and he can do a show and tell us a bit more about it. But Mark, let's bring this to a wrap now, dude. And this is talking to those listeners who are, indie brewery workers, indie brewery owners, not massive teams, not massive budgets or anything like that. But they're going, all right, we don't know what data is available, but I can see how it can be really advantageous to use it and get our, just start bringing it into the mix in our conversations. What are the first few things that you'd recommend that someone in that position would do to start to get a handle on their data and how to use it?
I think probably a good kind of starting point is to really understand your current account base. So everyone will have their database of their all of the kind of customers. So it's trying to try and get that into a good shape, so you can be really, really clear in terms of actually, well, who are our most valuable customers? If you were to sort of segment your heavy, medium, light, kind of like buyers, what is it about those kind of heavy kind of buyers, the most valuable accounts to you? What is it about them? So I think very much kind of start off with understanding kind of your current account base, and then as you then kind of move from that, there's probably kind of external data sources like the sorts of things that we can provide if you do want to look at kind of stepping beyond that. But having a real good understanding kind of your account base is a great starting point, because then it's kind of, then you can start to kind of go, well, okay, look, if these are our best accounts, how can we go and identify more of them? And if we are going to be prospecting, going and knocking on doors, you want to make sure that you're going to knocking on doors that are the places that are actually going to give you the best return, rather than just scattergun, just kind of trying to get your brands everywhere. It's much, much better. Like, you might want to go and see, especially the old 80-20 rule, isn't it? It's like, if kind of 80% of your sales are going to come from 20% of your accounts, it's like, well, if you're going out prospecting, like really, really understand, what that 20% looks like, and then you can try and go and bring on more accounts that meet that profile, rather than having like a huge tail of accounts.
Yeah, I suppose even breweries with the smallest amount of data know who they're sending the most beer to, which would suggest it's selling the best there. And then would you suggest that, like we actually started with earlier on, like actually going out there and sitting in the venue and trying to gather a little bit more information about that particular venue? So say, you are a small indie and you're servicing 30 different venues, which is more than enough for you right now. You highlight top 5, and then you actually spend a little bit of time with those top 5 to really flesh out the picture. Is that a good way to go?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to talk to people, I mean, go and, see how your brands are being consumed. So, what types of people are drinking your brands. Go and, speak to them about it. Get some kind of like live customer feedback kind of in the moment, really. What is it that people like about your brand? What would they like to see more from? Or what do they think you could do differently? Even getting kind of feedback on things like your brand design. There's all sorts of things. I think like people that if you spend time in trade, you'll never not learn something. But obviously the danger is that as we all get so busy, it's kind of the time out in trade is one of the first things that can drop out of the diary. But I think I over the years I've always found is like that time just out there kind of observing, kind of chatting to people is invaluable. Like you'll always learn something. So it's just trying to make sure that you prioritize that, really.
Very, very wise words, Mark, and a nice way to end this conversation, I believe. So, Mark, if people did want to get in touch, if they wanted to chat more about data and how you and the team could support, or even just get a few pointers, where's the best place to connect with you?
Obviously, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, a bit like you did originally, or drop me a note on hello@hdinsights.com is an email address that comes straight through to me. Or LinkedIn, as I said.
Fantastic. So that's how you're going to get hold of Mark. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, whoever is listening today or in the future, tap up Mark for some wicked data, because it is very fascinating for sure. I also need to do a shameless plug before we wrap up. So excuse me for 2 seconds, Mark, because I need to talk about Branding for Breweries, the book that's coming to Amazon near you on the 1st of December, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, for those brewery owners who you don't know what to buy them, then you can spend a mere £7.99 to get that shipped directly to your door for my brain in book format. Yeah, I don't know how I've done it, but I've crammed 20 years worth of branding knowledge into 140 pages. So enjoy, and then send me a picture when you've got it, because it'd be really hilarious to see that I'm invading households across the UK. Thanks for that, Mark. I appreciate your patience whilst I did that, bud. Beyond that, everyone, as always, thank you so much for your time, for your attention, wherever you are, what you're doing. You rock, and I will see you next time for the next episode of Branding for Breweries. Rock on, people. That's a wrap on this week's episode of Branding for Breweries. If you got something great from it, hit follow, like, and subscribe on your favorite streaming app. Or even better, leave a review, share it with your brewery pals, or get in touch, because I want to chat to you. Rock on!